He's been a consultant with the Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies in Texas, and he lectures at several universities around the Texas area in project management, emotional intelligence, human development, and risk management. And he has a BS from the Iowa State University and an MBA from Roosevelt University in Chicago, Illinois. Gary.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, am I live? Can anybody hear me?
No, that's not going out on the road. That's just coming in the camera.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Good, good. Okay, well, I'm Gary Rechtfertig, and I've been in the IT business for about 43 years. So I tell people I've pretty much done it the right way and the wrong way. And I started working with emotional intelligence about 3 years ago, and I've had several opportunities. I spoke at PMI Global 2 years ago. I spoke at the National Conference for Society for Emotional Intelligence last year. It's a fun concept because I think there's a lot of people who don't realize the challenge is that it is the key to being a success in business. There's a lot that's been said about it, and studies have shown significant differences in individual performance and career success in people who understand emotional intelligence. Here's a quote from Career Builders, Inc. It says 71% of human resource managers say they place more emphasis on emotional intelligence. 59% of employers said they won't even hire someone who has a high IQ but a low EQ. So they're beginning to look at it, I think is what they're saying. So there's a lot of factors involved. I better remove all this stuff. So what's the difference? Two things: enhanced relationships. So how will this help you? First of all, to understand your own emotional intelligence. The key is what motivates you. Who thinks what's the key motivator in this world? If you have any key questions as we go through it, what do you think's a key motivator?
Love.
Love? Mm-hmm. That's good. Ma'am?
I think the satisfaction with thinking that you're doing something useful.
Okay. Does anybody think this is a motivator? This is not a motivator. This is a goal. Yeah. Do you know what motivates people more than anything? Vision. Vision. You find someone with a vision, you can't stop them. Do you know why? They have a passion. So I tell people that if I was fulfilling my life's vision today, you know where I'd be? I'd be here standing talking to Adeline. This is my vision. And you can't stop anybody. But a vision is always bigger than yourself. So if I took Fabian and I paid all your debts and I gave you $100,000 a year, what would you do? After you took it, what would you do?
Oh. I don't know. I have to think about that.
We see that's what a vision is. So I was speaking at the Texas Council of Governors, all the financial people in the whole area, and it took me 3 people to find someone that knew what a vision was. The first one said he'd play golf. I said, well, let me talk to someone else then. So the third one said, I'd go build houses for humanity. That's a vision. My vision is to impact the project management community in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to touch the next generation. So I go to the universities and I speak to the kids. The ones that we know don't know anything and they think they know everything. Those kids. So that's what it's all about. And that's the process. So you have to have vision. And everybody really needs to have a written vision. So this will help you understand your own emotional intelligence, what really motivates you. And do we really have an idea how dangerous it is not to be in touch with our feelings? So why worry about feelings? Because they're the key to personal and professional relationships. Now, there's a couple things you need to remember. Can everybody see this board over here? Okay, paradigms. This is not in the book. Power, perceptions. Okay, paradigms are your value and your value and your belief system. This is one of the keys. Perceptions, power, emotions, and thoughts. Emotions, power, attitudes. And attitudes, power, behavior. So, if you or someone you know has a problem with the behavior and attitude, it starts back there. Basically, a child gets almost all of his character, 80% of his character before he goes to kindergarten, and he's fully developed character-wise by the time he's 11. So most of your value and belief systems come from your early childhood. And what happens is you get, because of that, I grew up in a strict religious type environment. So we had kind of certain moral codes, you know. But the problem was that they not only created perceptions, they created misperceptions. So you go through life with a misperception. What was your first name? Pardon me?
Jim.
Jim. Yeah, if I had an experiences with a guy named Jim maybe when I was 15, I may go through my whole life thinking that all Jims are not good because I remember that one. But that's not true. That's a misperception. Now, I had that. It was the name was Martha. I had a schoolmate that was Martha, and she ran off with a junk man. And that wasn't kosher, so I thought, so there's something wrong with Martha. So it took me 20 years to get over that one. So that was a misperception. So you can have valuable perceptions, or you can also have misperceptions. So, and this will also help us manage change. So they have, how do we deal with conflict? Do we realize and do we pay attention to those around us and how they're feeling? So how many have been involved in some type of conflict in the last week? Raise your hand. Okay. Conflict with people and conflict with systems are two different things, because systems and hardware don't talk back to you, right? That's very important. But they've also identified that the biggest reason for failure for projects is people, because sometimes people don't get along. That's true. Very true. So we have to realize that. And we want to improve our productivity. As you understand emotional intelligence and work with it, your productivity will increase. So what's the result? We're building relationships so we'll have better managed project and we can lead people better. There was a CEO in Dallas here. He was going to replace himself because he was retiring. So he had 4 candidates. He picked the one with the best emotional intelligence, and he brought the other 3 back into the company. The company just soared as far as productivity and the value. If he would have taken his financial person, he may have lost everything. Not saying financial people can't handle it, but the ones with emotional intelligence handled it better. That's the key. How you manage people. Has anyone here ever worked with anybody who's difficult? Difficult. That's another word for jerk, in case you're wondering. Okay? We've all seen those, and we could probably remember them pretty vivid. I had one of my students, I have an emotional intelligence class that I teach, and I had one of my students, and he said, we have a contractor, he was involved with large construction, HVAC. He said, we have one of our contractors who's a subject matter expert, and if he comes to a meeting, the partners in my company will not even attend the meeting. He's so brutal. So I just said, how do you get along with him? Oh, he says, I get along with him fine. How come? Oh, he says, I found out why he's that way. He says, everybody that comes to him always brings incomplete information, and he just slaughters them. And he has a lot of razzle-dazzle to go with it. So he said, I just bring him what he needs because I know what he wants. He comes back to me. That's emotional intelligence. So the people that have it normally will do better than those that don't. And you can overcome people that are difficult, because there's a number of people who are difficult. What you don't realize is there's a reason why they're difficult. And that's some of the things you can learn. Okay, so we can build relationships. Here's 2 definitions. One is by Daniel Goleman. We remember that. You can take notes on your paper if you want to. Ability to recognize and regulate emotions in ourselves and others. There's a recent one, Anthony Massario. He wrote the book that I'm going to give away. This is called Emotional Intelligence for Project Managers. And just remember, if you win it, it's for the guy in the cube next to you, okay? Because you're okay. But you better read it before you give it to the guy in the cube so you know what to expect. But this is a pretty good book. And if you're not a project manager, just write in your name. Mary, Joe, Henry, whatever. It'll work. Because what I'm talking about tonight, there's layers and layers and layers of things that are in here. And if you want, it's in the biography. You can get this from Amazon for about $13. It'd be a good primer for you. So he says, knowing and managing our own emotions and those of others for improved performance. Now, Anthony is a quality young man, but he was in project management about 20 years, and he realized that basically, as a project manager, his life was a train wreck. His dad was an alcoholic. didn't have a relationship with his father, and he hadn't figured things out. So he started studying about emotional intelligence. Then he started getting larger projects with more people and handling them successfully. There's a huge difference. So the problem with emotional intelligence is that all the assessments suffer from validity, being able to consistently and reliably measure EI in individuals. There's no validated instruments. I took a test that a friend of mine had, and I think it was, I don't know, $400. And I had a problem because he said it handled bias. And I figured, well, that's great. It handles some variables. Well, it handled too many variables. It wouldn't let me finish the test. It said I was too positive. I said, holy mackerel. So I had to lie about 5 questions so I could get through the test. So I didn't want to administer that kind of test to anybody that I knew. But so I haven't found a good test either. There are some that are indicative, but they're not, it's not that precise. But you can always tell. If you go into a meeting with 8 or 10 people and someone in there is sitting with emotional intelligence, you can always tell who they are. Because they know what to say, they know when to say it, and they know what to say, and they know when to shut up. That's valuable. Okay? And my wife teaches me that. Yeah. So, what do? How much do PMs know about emotional intelligence? Only 10% of managers surveyed said they were familiar with it. 88 said they wanted to know more. And so they did some graphs. It's kind of interesting. Look at this guy down here, the team lead. He said his knowledge is about 27%, which would be not a lot, nothing substantial except for one thing. He said it contributed to his current success 100%. That's not bad for something you don't know what it is. And his future. So all these things, you can see, they're very high level. And so that really has an impact. And it's just kind of now coming into being. This is what I call the house that Anthony built. Okay? Several key areas: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, and team leadership. And they're all important and they're all valuable. And when I teach my course, I spend the first 2 sessions on self-assessment. That's who you are. That's usually a pretty big surprise for the average person. And, really how you function. And there's ways to find that out because a lot of people don't realize that. And then we move over into other relationships. Self-awareness, emotional self-assessment. You have to be present to win. Self-awareness is living in the present. Have you ever talked to somebody and you really knew they weren't there? They really weren't following you, they really didn't want to be there, or they just weren't listening, and they're looking at you. That's not being present. So in order to have self-awareness, you have to know who you are, and you have to be able to keep up with people. And a lot of times that involves eye contact. Accurate self-assessment. You need to figure out how you tick, what is your emotional state, and how it affects others. Self-confidence starts with your family. The key to the family relationship, remember we talked about paradigms, powering perceptions. The key to the paradigms of the value system is your relationship with your father. Remember I told you Anthony, his father's an alcoholic, so he wasn't available. That's why he had challenges, one of the reasons. They did a survey, and they had a prison with 1,000 men in it, and it was Mother's Day. So they said, why don't we send out Mother's Day cards? That's a great idea. So they did. How many prisoners wanted to send out Mother's Day cards? 999. So they said, well, now it's Father's Day. Well, how many of you guys want to send out Father's Day card? One. 1 out of 1,000. That's 999 broken relationships. Broken relationships are powerful, plus and minus. And that's why when you're able to restore them, it's really powerful too. So self-confidence is a key factor, but it starts young. It doesn't start when you're 20 or 30 or 40. It starts when you're 2 or 3 or 4. Self-management. Practice self-control. They did a survey, and they had a group of young boys. They're about 8 years old, and they put them in a room with some tables. They put a marshmallow in front of them. They said, we're going to come back in a half an hour, and if your marshmallow's there, you can get another one. Okay, so they did, and then they taped it. So these boys someone just took it and ate it. One kid was over there banging his head against the wall over a marshmallow. I'm not quite sure about that one. And then others just sat there. They came back. If they had it left, they gave it to them. What's the difference? Well, the difference was that 24 years later, the kids that waited had 50% more income, and they were 75% more advanced in their careers. That was just from the element of self-confidence, just from that element, self-control. So Another part of self-management is looking for emotional triggers. Events set us up for emotional breakdowns. Some situations activate events that leave us vulnerable to emotional breakdowns. The mood of others, sometimes criticism, sometimes fatigue. Does anyone here ever say, well, when I get tired, I get cranky? Yeah, you get emotional when you get tired. But there's a reason. You're wearing yourself out. So, and then we have to see others clearly and identify our emotional patterns. Just a second, I'm off one. Yeah. So, they have a saying, get a checkup from the neck up and get rid of stinking thinking. You know what stinking thinking is? Negative thinking. I know people that when I talk to them, every time I talk to them, whatever I ask them or say, what comes back is going to be negative. Those are not my close friends. Okay? You need to kind of raise the bar because thinking is just like a battery. There's a positive and negative side. I prefer to stay on the positive side because it's going to enhance my relationships being in a positive mode. So if there are people that are continuously negative, doesn't mean you don't know them, but they're not your best friend. I know people that said, well, I've known Joe for 30 years, went to third grade together. Yeah, but he's been dragging you through the mud for 20 years and you never realized that. If you get a hold of your own emotions, you'll find out who's positive and negative. And then you can act accordingly. And then when you add friends, you add the positive side. You know, because there's nothing wrong with helping people. But helping someone out and being a good friend is another story. So a lot of people need to realign their friendships. Watch what you say. Watch words always and never. It's never always, and it's never never, okay? There's a little bit in between. One of the things we do is we journal. Does anybody here journal? Okay. Try journaling by emotions. When you go to work tomorrow, get a little secretary book, and at the end of the day, just write down 2 situations. I ran into Joe today, and this happened. How did I feel? Well, Joe is supposed to. Are you Joe? Jim. Okay, good. I'm not using your name. Good. Joe was supposed to do something, but he didn't do it. I felt betrayed, defeated, whatever, because it was one of my deliverables, and he didn't make it. Okay? Do that for a month, and you'll know 2 things. First of all, you know who you are. Secondly, you'll know who every key contact you have at work and in your personal life, you'll know who they are and how they fit as far as the emotional side, the emotional intelligence side of it. And you'll find some people are going to be some of your strongest advocates, and other people, you need to change relationships. About a year ago, we did that. We kind of have awakenings every once in a while. Well, we have some practical awakenings, sometimes we have spiritual awakenings. But anyway, so I just looked at relationships. I had relationships that weren't producing anything. I just cut them off, released them. I want something that's going to produce something that's going to support my vision. So I prefer to work with and be with positive people. It's not more fun than the other ones. So 3 steps to managing our emotions. Identify our feelings, determine the underlying cause, why we're emotional or angry, and take action to get clear. One of the keys with anger is that anger is a secondary emotion. It's not a primary. So you know what that means? There's something behind it. How many people have been angry in the last month? If you're alive, you've got to have one of these, okay? In the last month, the last week, the last day. How many people are angry now? Okay, well, that's life. I was speaking at American Airlines. There's a lady up there. You probably weren't there, I don't think. But anyway, I had 40 ladies and Joe. So I said, Joe, it's you, me, and the girls. So I went through that and all that. He's over there waving frantically. The last hour, who cares? The last minute. I said, Joe, what's up? He says, I manage all these people. So you got a manager with anger management problems, possibly. But anyway, that was his personal crisis in life, I'm sure. But anyway, but anger's not primary, it's secondary. So there's something behind it. And that's where you get into the betrayal, the defeat, the rejection. Anybody here ever been rejected? I have. Last couple of days. I taught a course that you always go through that. So the key is that some people have a little purse full of rejection, and some others have 29 suitcases full of rejection. And everybody else is in between. Everybody's got some. How you manage that and how you handle it's very important to your success, because you can't allow yourself to be offended. If you do, you're no different than the one that did whatever they did to you. And the funny thing about being offended is somebody does something, and I'm sure Jim never does this, but Jim gets mad about it, And then he doesn't know, but the person that did it didn't even recognize it. So he walks off, and now Jim's madder yet because he won't even apologize. He didn't know he did anything. And if Jim's not smart, it'll fester and fester and fester. And a week later, it's worse. And a month later, it's worse. There are people who do it. They haven't talked to people for 20 years. See, the problem with that is that people get bitter over it, and bitterness is like drinking poison and hoping the other guy dies. It doesn't happen. But you'll die. What's going to die? Your vision. You can't carry a vision through to completion and have bitterness in your heart. And I'm sure we've all been irritated with people, and I'm sure we've all felt, hurt and all that stuff. But most of it, it's of no value. Is it going to serve you to walk around with your head, hanging down and say, oh, woe is me? I don't know anybody's been a success with that technique. And if you're going to be an example to others, we can't do that either. So the next one is social awareness, empathy. Who knows what a definition of empathy is? Definition of empathy. Dina.
I would define empathy as understanding where you're at on an emotional level.
Okay.
Because I've been there or done that.
Okay. And there's another thing with empathy. If you remember the old saying, empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and walking a mile with them. That way you're a mile away and you're wearing their shoes and they never fit, so your feet hurt big time. But there's a key to empathy, very important. In order to empathize with someone and really understand what's going on with them, you have to suspend judgment. You suspend judgment, you can work with anybody. And, my wife and I do a lot of work in our church, and we have people that are in very difficult situations, and we can empathize with it, but we don't have to jump in the hole with them that they're in. But if you suspend judgment, then you can be an asset. Because a lot of people, and that's called validation. A lot of people don't know how to validate someone. They just, come over and pat them on the shoulder. Don't worry, you'll get better. Well, that's not what they need to hear. They need to hear, I understand that why you're angry, and I'm available if you need me. But people say the dumbest things when people are hurting, or even, someone and their spouse dies or something like that. Don't worry, you can get another one. Who wants to hear that? Or my wife died too and I got over it, so don't worry about it. Those are not positive remarks. And and they treat you like you're a dog, just pat you, stroke you a couple times, you're supposed to get better so you can produce more. That's not what happens, and everybody goes through tragedies. We have a friend right now, his mother's dying. That's traumatic. And we're all going sometime, so we're going to go through those trauma and those situations. I did some consulting with a company. It was a transportation company, and their real problem was their advertising agency because they couldn't get anything out of them, couldn't get a project done. And the problem was that their office manager got divorced, and she was a wreck, and the company did nothing. They just let her continue to run the show. So everything went south really fast. So you have to recognize that and sometimes make adjustments. Take a break. The Lord only knows that we need one. But that's what you need to do because everybody's going to go through some trauma at some time or another. So that's empathy. Empathy is very important. We have to remember you have to suspend judgment. Organizational awareness. Read the emotions and political realities in groups. Detect social networks and key power relationships. You should know people who have influence in the area of emotional intelligence. And that's one where I call it going to school. So when I go into meetings, I always look for the people with emotional intelligence, and they're there. They're not always talking. That's one of the things. And so you just go to school, and then after you have observed them a couple of times, invite them to lunch and pay for it. That's how you overcome someone who's not very nice or what you may consider an enemy. Take them to lunch a couple of times and pay for it. You're either going to get over it or you can solve other problems. Who knows? But anyway, so find somebody who is doing a good job, and then just talk to them. Usually even, I know vice presidents, they'll sit down with anybody and explain to them how they got where they are and why and how. And that's how you learn. You got to have someone, basically a mentor. And you'll find that there's certain, a project team can have an EQ. You can just tell this team's working better than the other. You always see that. This works a lot better. They're always successful. And this one is just a mess. Everybody's arguing all the time. There's a huge difference. See others clearly. See what they feel. Watch for emotional words. Look in their eyes. It's the filter of life. Recognize your own bias. I had one of my students in class, he says, I cannot afford to get angry at work. He said, when I get angry, my whole head turns red. So if Mary comes up and looks at me and my head's red, she knows I'm angry. So that's kind of an unusual problem, but he's the only one I know that has it. So, but a lot of people, you just look at the facial expression, you can tell what's going on. You know whether to say anything. And a lot of times it's best not to say anything because you know what you're going to get back. It's not a positive. Okay? So, see others clearly. Emotional boundaries. That's where one person's emotion leaves, another one starts. The moods of others can hook you. Sometimes, have you ever gone into a meeting and you just kind of get the feeling, this is not going to be a happy time? I was speaking at one of the local hospitals here, and the lady that invited me was a director, and she said, I went to this meeting and everybody was yelling. I said, holy mackerel. She says, what should I do? I said, whose meeting is it? She said, it's mine. Shut it down. I can't do that. Why not? Because she works for a vice president, and the person yelling is working for the vice president. What she forgot to tell me was the person that yells was standing 2 feet from me. That was the yeller. Okay? So some people are just out of control. One of my students came to me the other day and he said, I walked in this meeting and there was 2 women there and they were arguing and yelling at each other. I said, really? She said, yeah. He said, yeah, they're both VPs. I said, oh, good cat fight, huh? And so he went and told them they're having a cat fight. So I haven't talked to them yet. So that's inappropriate. How much progress can you get professionally as a project manager? And I can't tell you how many people I know where they have. And some people say, yelling's just part of our company culture. I said, find another company. It's got to be better than that. When you talk about stress, it's another story. So emotional boundaries are very important. So how do we improve social awareness? We improve empathetic listening skills, learn to listen, identify emotional red flags, go to school, watch others who've mastered it, keep a journal, find differences and areas of commonality to connect with. You can always find something that you can connect with. Relationship management, stakeholder relationships. Managing all your stakeholders, not only the project team. You need relationship strategies based on the priority of the stakeholder. That's very important. We teach people in our classes how to manage stakeholders and how to evaluate them so you can find out who's going to have the heaviest impact on your project and whether they are currently a positive or negative impact on your project. And a lot of people don't know that. They don't know who is and who isn't. So you're trying to manage them all. My last major project, I started Doulos about 10 years ago. My last major project was at TXU. I did electric deregulation, $28 million. I picked up the phone one day and someone is yelling into my ear and I said, hello? They're yelling, where's my $840,000? I said, I don't know, who are you? Executive Vice President. So the problem is that you only get, to erase a bad first impression takes 30 positive encounters. I've never seen her since in my life. Her problem was she had a financial analyst, left the company, she got a new one, came in, she decided to take it in her own hands. Well, people like that are not very bright. I don't know how they got where they did, but they did. So I said, well, let me check it out. So I checked it out. Her team had spent like 60 or 70% of it. Another team had spent some, we spent some. But the thing was that it showed such a low level of EQ to take people you don't even know and just pick up the phone and just start yelling. And you know what I really want to say is, are you an idiot? But I didn't, because I didn't know her name. But she showed me she was not a very bright person, because people that are intelligent don't do that. And what she should have done was send out the new hireling to find out. It might take a little longer, but we would have talked with anybody. And the problem is I've never seen her again, so my only impression that I have of her is that first impression, and that was not a positive one. Okay? Has anyone ever run into that? And the problem is you have to work with them every day, sometimes. Okay, so relationship management, developing others, feedback and coaching, how to improve them. I think within a team structure, one of the biggest problems with people that don't work well with people is they don't understand who they are. So say Jim was on my team, or say I came to work for Raytheon and we're on the same team and I'm your boss, just for grins, okay? So what's the first thing I do? Take Jim to lunch. Let him talk, tell me his whole life story. Why? Because I want to know who Jim is. When I come in, I don't just look at Jim as something to work with and accomplish something. He's a person, but I know something about him. And you can do that. You take the most difficult person in your company that you have to work with and take them to lunch. Pay for it. Don't take them to McDonald's. Take them to Saltgrass, okay? You don't worry about Ruth Chris. Nobody can afford that, okay? So anyway, and just find out who they are and just ask them a few questions. They'll tell you their whole life story. I just started a class last week, and I said, okay, we want to do introductions, but we're not going to do 30-second introductions. We're going to do 15 to 30-minute introductions. Well, they didn't know I was jesting. So by the time we got done, it was over 2 hours. And one of the persons said, could we have a little recap? It's been 30 minutes. And there are substantial things in people's life, but once you understand who they are and basically where they've come from, we're talking about from childhood, whatever they can recall, and relationships that they've had in particular. There's a lot of hurting people, a lot. Because the 7 or 8 people I had in that class, there wasn't one of them that didn't have substantial challenges in their life, substantial. One of them, just to give you an idea, was an engineer, a nice guy. I've known him for 2 or 3 years. Does anybody know where Bangladesh is? Well, Bangladesh is kind of like Kansas. It's really flat, and about every 3 or 4 years, you hear it on the news, they have a flood. Anything. They call them cyclones. We call them hurricanes. It'll wipe out like 100,000 or 200,000 homes. He had that happen twice. So he lost everything he had twice, and they spent time in a refugee camp. How's that for coming up, a structure to come up and grow up under? And so by the time he got here, he was already in his 30s. So now he's a little bit older. He's got young children, and he's finding success. Guess what the number one priority in his life is? Safety net. Because he's got to protect against what's happened to him over and over. That's traumatic situations. And he's really a nice guy. Everyone's got to adjust to life. Some have to adjust more than others. And so everyone has a background, but if you have someone difficult to work with, find out who they are, be nice to them, take them to lunch, say, I want to pay for it, and then just talk. You can ask them a couple of questions. It's usually good for half an hour, most any time. Okay? That's one of the keys. Telling the truth. Be honest and direct. Say no once beyond our limits. Saying yes sometimes can damage our careers. Has anyone in here ever said yes and they had no earthly idea how they're going to accomplish it? Anybody? Yeah. And here's how you take care of saying yes and no. I figured it out a few years back. When someone asks me to do something, I always say one thing. I add a half a day to it, and that's when I'm going to respond. So if they ask me in the morning, I said, let me check my schedule, and I'll tell you this afternoon. It's the afternoon. I said, let me check my schedule, I'll tell you tomorrow morning. Then I don't have any problem saying no. If it doesn't fit, because what people don't realize is we end up doing things and helping out other people, but the challenge is we didn't get our deliverables done for that day either. And then who's going to pay? The piper. You are. It's nice to be nice, but we have to be practical too. So that's what I do. I never answer anything immediately, unless it's her. Okay. I was talking this is the prettiest girl in the world. I was talking to her the other day, and I said, and she wanted to do something. I said, well, honey, do you want me to talk about it, or do you want a solution? Because that's what men do. They always go for the solution thing, fix it. So she said, I want a solution. So I gave her one. Then she didn't do anything. That's okay. That's what you asked for, so I gave it to her, right? See, that's the problem. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Who Switched Off My Brain? Settling the Issue of He Said, She Said. Now that's very important because we all work usually with different members of the opposite sex. So when you think about a movie, a woman likes to describe the second scene of the first part, and the man's got a little trailer here that's 30 seconds long. He just laid out the whole movie for you. Well, once you realize that's how guys think, it's easier to think about. Is that right? She figured it out. We're going down the road to church the other day, and I said something, and I look over, she's just smiling. She figured it out. She says, that's how you are. Now I know. So that only took, 20 years to get there? So it might take a few years to get there, but anyway, you can do it. So we're not the same types. So let's talk a little bit about team leadership, communication. Communication is understanding and managing the emotional tone of the team. You can be the key. Conflict management, resolve conflict using emotional intelligence. Inspirational leadership, cast a vision to motivate, engage, and inspire. Improving team leadership, get the right people, communicate successfully, motivate, clear the landmines and roadblocks. One of the things that I think is important for a project manager that I've always tried to do is for the people that are working for you is to clear the road mines. Anybody here familiar with sheep? Sheep are dumber than a rock. So if I was a shepherd, I was taking my sheep into the next pasture, and I just turned them loose, they'd eat anything there. What a shepherd does is he goes to the next pasture and he clears out all the poisonous type weeds and all that, because the sheep will just eat them. So he prepares the way for them. And I figure if I've got a team of, say, 5 or 10 people, if I can keep the roadblocks and keep all the wild weeds away from them so they can just continue their work, I can probably keep my productivity higher than anybody else. Because if you interrupt somebody, it's not 10 minutes. It's probably another 20 minutes to readjust, and then someone else is interrupting them. So that's one of the things a good manager does. He clears the way for his people, and that's part of emotional intelligence. So they know they can trust you to keep the little things away from, because there's always little things. And if you let other people have access to your people all the time, you're probably going to cut your productivity 50%, maybe more. I've seen more. So, and then I always believe in taking out your team members to lunch and finding out on an ongoing relationship who they are. Because things happen in life, some are substantial. And you need to know how your people, because that's going to impact their work. Yes?
What if you primarily work with remote teams?
It's a little more difficult. I talked to someone the other day that said we had a conference call the other day for an hour with our team, and we didn't talk about business. And one of the things that I recommend is visiting the people. I know a lot of my students are in international situations, but they know their people well on the other end because they'll go visit them like once or twice a year. And I had a student one time, he says, well, my company won't let me go visit them, and I work with 25 people in another country. I said, good, get your PMP, take our advanced MBA course, go find a company that will. So he did. It was a big 6 firm too. So he just left. You know, because you can't work frustrated your whole life. But it's like if, what was your name? Pam. So if I'm working with Pam and she's in anywhere today, right? You know, Poland, Brazil, or anything, but I never have been able to sit down with you. If I just went out and we had a lunch together or something, wherever you are, we'll know who each other are. So then when you're talking, I know what you're thinking a little bit, not totally, but it's a lot easier than trying to guess what the other side's thinking. That's why PMI says we make a telephone call, you always verify. Okay, we decided we had 3 deliverables, let's go through those again. Find out the second one didn't get across exactly. So that's the why, but it's more difficult, no question. Are you able to visit them?
Depends.
Yeah. If you got a whole bunch, you need to visit them. If you have 2 or 3, see if maybe they can come to visit you.
Well, I guess the problem with my organization is that we're matrix,
Mm-hmm.
and we have 1,000 people, and for each project, I could get some other
Wow.
people
Yeah.
working on it, and it could be.
I would just call them up and have one of those, kind of informal conversations. Let's not talk about business. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am and how I work and so on. Basically what your values are. And then and then say, do the same. So, because, there's nothing, so you really get different people all the time. Yeah. I used to be in a structure like that, but I found the people that always produced the most, and I always went to them regularly wherever I could. So yeah, but it's more difficult with the virtual teams. So now we'll get into something interesting. Creating a positive environment. What makes a great team? Set expectations and put it in writing. Mutual respect. Challenging work. Commitment and unity. Diversity of team members. Find out how your people are doing. I heard a president of a company a couple years ago, and he doesn't tell the story very much, but he says, our company is very interested in our people. He said, but we're also interested as a company in other people. So he said, we always had a Thanksgiving meal, dinner for all of our people, and kind of got old. He said, so we'll try something different. So one year they said, well, let's bring cans for the local food bank. So they brought cans, big pile on each table. 3 years later, they had pallets sitting in front. They delivered 20,000 pounds of food. This company only has 130 people. See, that's a giving company. And if you want to have a team builder with your team, take them to the food bank. Pack food on Saturday morning. That'll bring about more of a spirit of humility and understanding where people are. Because today, the food banks are serving people that could be your neighbor. It's a little different. And unfortunately, anybody's eligible, and sometimes they are. So, do something that's positive. Now, we have a big mystery right here. It says your brain is creatively performing 400 billion actions at any moment, and you're conscious of 2,000 of them. So here's your brain. Here's the subconscious. Everything you've ever seen or heard is in your subconscious, and here's the conscious. Now, of those 2,000, I think I've got a handle on probably 6 or 7 of those 2,000 at any given time. But there's a lot going on. And what happens with the subconscious is that sometimes things are rote. You know, tying your shoe, that's a rote thing, but it's still from your subconscious. And other things are not quite as difficult. But sometimes you may react and you don't realize it's a subconscious. Now, the best example I have is that I don't own a gun. I don't have a firearm, and I don't know if I ever have. But if someone came into my house and they had a weapon and I saw it and I had a weapon, I know what I would do. I'd put 3 bullets in their chest, because Jethro Leroy Gribbs does that, and I've seen 100 episodes of NCIS. That's in the library, but the library comes back fast. Now, I don't know what they do if they've got the gun and you don't. I think that's one where you duck or something. I don't even have a baseball bat, you know. All right, but that's the subconscious. You have to realize everything you've ever seen is there. And sometimes it'll come up when you don't want it to come up. Someone says something, triggers something, and all of a sudden you've got a challenge. And your mouth's beginning to open and say things that you've never thought of saying. Has anyone ever had that happen? See, because emotional intelligence, if it can work in the workplace, it'll definitely work at home. There's no question. I had one of my students recently, he was an engineer, 60 years old, one of the worst job situations I've ever seen, and he just took legal custody of his 2 grandchildren, who are 8 and 10 years old. So you got 2 hurting kids, obviously, both rejected by both parents. He said, when I finished, he said, I think I've actually figured out, beginning to understand my kids and doing much better at work. So it does have good results. So you got to watch out. What happens when you have a thought, it'll come in through the base, and if you just let it sit here, have you ever seen someone that when something happens, they just kind of act instantaneously, and it's usually not good? Then it goes through a gland in the middle, and then it hits your reasoning up in the front. Well, what happens is if you just wait about 3 or 4 seconds, you may not do the stupid thing that you were thinking of doing. And I had a lady that I knew, and when she went to meetings, she'd always take a bottle of water. And when Jim decided to say something, she'd always take a sip of water because she knew it was going to be stupid and she didn't want to react to it. So she had 4 seconds to say, this is not worth it. And that's why she was swallowing her water. But Jim still said something stupid and she still didn't react. There are ways to control that. And if not, you can't, put your fingers in your ears or anything. Just take a sip of water. That seems more natural, okay? So you can do that. Now, one of the problems that we have to work with, does anybody here have any stress in their life? Anybody? Okay, none whatsoever. Okay, so you'd be a candidate. Research has shown that 87% of our illnesses can be attributed to our thought life. What and how you think affects the emotional state. The American Institute of Stress says between 50 to 70% of all visits to primary care physicians are related to stress-related disorders. And I've got an article up here, and it says that it's about stress. And it says, stress has beaten stroke, heart attack, cancer, and back problems as the main reason British workers lose 4 more weeks of work. Well, sometimes they like to lose 4 more. But the problem with stress is that it can be a killer. I tell people the purpose of emotions is not to react, but more to focus. Okay. And who knows what the source of stress is? Why do we get so stressed out? What's the key reason? What drives stress? Pardon me? Unresolved, true. Anxiety.
I would say thoughts, what we're thinking. Right?
Sure, true. Fear. Fear does. Now, listen to this. This is very interesting. The body, I got to get the percentages here. Fear triggers 1,400 known physical and chemical responses in the body and activates 30 different hormones. Fear. Because people say, well, I'm not afraid. Well, sure, you're afraid whether you're going to get home on time, whether you get to work on time, whether you get deliverable done, whether John does what he's supposed to, whether Mary does what he's supposed to. you ever said something, I might keep track of this, I'll just go crazy. No, that's just the stress factor. But it's all based on fear. And your body reacts. So remember you hear the story about the man in the woods, he sees the bear, and his body pumps up, his veins constrict, and he takes off. It's adrenaline rush, okay? So what happens when you go to work, your boss yells at you, your veins constrict, build up, and you can't run anyplace. And then you just hold it for 10 hours. I had someone who was attending one of my symposiums that I spoke at, and he said, I've been working a lot of hours, 14, 15 hours a week. And he said, I took one day off, took my wife to the beach. Guess where I ended up? I said, emergency room. He says, yeah, how'd you know that? Stress. His body was not used to the, the calmness. It spiked. He started to go in convulsions because of the stress. But not only that, a couple years ago, I had a couple of classes at one of the major hospitals here. 2 of their IT people came into work that year, sat down at their desks, and they both died. Stress, heart attacks. Well, what happens then when you abuse your body with stress, it's constricting, say, are we going, are we coming, and all that, or you just hold it like that. After a while, your kidneys say, I'm tired of this junk. 15 years of this is enough. Then your liver says, I'm going to give out too because I have to process too much stuff. Then all of a sudden, everything fails. But that's one of the main causes, and fear is the thing that triggers it. So how do you overcome stress? That's an interesting subject. The more you understand about emotional intelligence, the more you'll be able to handle that. Because a lot of times I think people, they have so much stress even with other relationships, even people that they have to work with today. Because they don't have a good relationship, they don't know really who they are, so they're afraid of everything. Then they go home, they're afraid of this, they're afraid of that, or won't get your bills paid, or won't get home in time, won't have the supper. It's like the guy that was a paratrooper, and he jumped out of the airplane. The guy says, okay, you pull this chute, and then if that doesn't work, you come here, you pull this ring over here, and then the truck will pick you up. So he jumps out, pulls the first one, it doesn't work, pulls the second one. He says, I bet you the truck won't be there either. So there's a lot going on. Remember, we have to develop coping strategies. Your thoughts trigger your emotions trigger your body how to respond, and your body becomes the victim if it is negative. The brain is like a library of thoughts and responses. If negative, you respond based on your emotions. Never react to your first emotion. So, inseparable. Our brain, our thoughts, our emotions, and our body. The power over emotions, over the whole body, lies in how you integrate it. Conclusion, you can control your thoughts. Analyze them, make a decision to accept or reject every thought, and build positive memories, and deal with the past thoughts and emotions that need changing. So if I came to your door, Jim, and I said, excuse me, Jim, I got a package for you. It's got a bomb in it, so I've got to leave. What would you tell me? You tell me, take it with me. Well, it's just when people come up and say something negative, just let them take it with them. You don't have to hang on to it. You don't even have to accept it. That takes a little practice, but you can. And then once you know who those people are, you do what you need to work with them, but you don't have to overdo it unless you can begin to impact them. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. I know people that they're just critical, everything in life. But you can still work with them, because when you have a relationship, it's good to have trust, but it's not necessary if you don't have it. You can have a valid relationship. So you can work with someone that's very difficult in your company, even though you don't have that trust factor. It's very possible. So, build positive memories. Now, I want to talk about some key principles that improve your capacity to succeed. The first one is silence. Can never be misquoted. Almost anything else can be, but the power of your words. It's not what other people say about you that matters, it's what you believe about yourself. Words are the bridge to your future. Your words reveal what's on your heart. Every idle word can impact you in your future. You will never go beyond the self-portrait you have of yourself. So if you don't think you can succeed, you probably won't. I can't tell you how many people say, I grew up and my parents told me I was stupid. Well, it doesn't take more than a few opportunities before a child will believe that. And some of these people are really bright. I was having lunch with one of my students once, very bright, young lady, probably 35 or 40, very attractive, 2 teenage children, husband, the whole deal. And we're sitting there, she says, I'm so stupid. I said, no, you're not. I said, stupid people don't get their PMP. Not everybody gets the PMP, you know that. So I said, that's not true at all. But here she is, she's halfway through her life, and she still thinks that she's stupid, but she's not. And you have to realize that, and sometimes we can help people out with that. Yes?
So, is there a wrong time to be silent?
Is there a wrong time? Well, are you married? When your husband asks you a question, prolonged silence might be the wrong time, but really silence is okay, even when you're in discussions and that, because it's really kind of a negotiation tool. It gives you time to think. Now, my wife, well, when she asks me something, I tell this her almost every time. She says, what do you think? I said, I don't know, I just heard it. So I like to kind of think about things, and maybe a day later I may have an opinion about it. Is that close? Okay, I gotta make sure I'm close, okay? Because I'm going home with this lady tonight, okay? So, but that's just the way I am. But no, there's a place for silence. And if you don't know what to say, or you just want to meditate on it, and they just probe you, just say, let me think about it. I'll give you some input later. If they say when, just say tomorrow. Gives you a whole day to think about it. But there's a time for it, and people don't use it enough. The last thing you need in your meetings is someone who thinks they have to be talking. You've always seen those people. They have to be talking. Well, sometimes they have to be not talking, because you have to kind of assimilate things, and talking becomes chatter when you're trying to do that. So the power of your words. When fatigue walks in, efficiency and competency leave. Fatigue being costly. Tired minds rarely make good decisions. It's up to yourself to repair yourself. Work hard and play hard. I heard about an executive in Dallas here. He leaves, the latest he'll leave work is 7:38, because he did a little study and he found out that everything that happens after 7:38, he ends up cleaning up the next morning. So, it's progressing. I work till midnight or 2 o'clock, but I got a few problems there, and I spent the whole next morning cleaning them up. And now I'm out of wind or gas or whatever you want to call it. So fatigue can be costly, and that's why I don't know how people do it 14 or 15 hours a day. I don't know. I mean, you're not functioning probably for a good portion of that time, and energy drinks can't hold you forever. So just be practical. It's interesting that PMI thinks, this is cute, that a PMI project manager should be able to accomplish all his activities in 40 hours. It's a great idea. I believe it. Because you reach a point, law of diminishing returns, I mean, once you hit that point, it goes down really fast. And then you're just making mistakes that are going to be costly. So, schedule a day off to relax outside of work. You'll think better, make better decisions, control emotions, and you do more in less time. Stop your frantic push for success. The fire of desire. You're not going to lose your desire and your fire just because you took a day off. Another principle, whatever you give has been given to someone else's needs. Each person has a different combination of skills, capabilities, and gifts. They have what they call a career coefficient. Anybody heard of career coefficient? Career coefficient is what's inside of you that you know you're supposed to do. I know my career coefficient. I'm here to teach and to, one of them, spread emotional intelligence, the concept. Okay, what percent of people do you think know their career coefficient and are walking in it? Fabian, what percent? 80 or 8? 80, 20. So 8 out of 10 people either know what's in their heart, what they really like to do, and they're not doing it, or they don't even know, which would be worse, to know and not be able to do it. I had a friend of mine that was a vice president at Siemens, and he came through a couple of our courses, and his heart's desire was bluegrass music. And they finally helped him. They laid off his whole division. So he moved to Houston, built a little recording studio out, goes down to the clubs and plays every weekend. And I don't know, he's middle-aged, 45 or 50. I figured, that is great. I wonder how long it'll last. Well, he just came on the market, so he had 2.5 years of total joy. Okay, but the thing is that there's something in your heart. I have a daughter, Jeannie and I have a daughter. She loves to help people. She's a family therapist. And that's her whole passion. And when she was in college and she graduated, she had her bachelor's degree, she was a social worker, and she said, Dad, I don't make enough to live. And I've got a roommate. And I said, but honey, you're doing what you love. Not too many people get to do that. She's doing what she loved. Then she got a master's degree. Then she got an MBA. In her last position, she was running a company. And then she graduated. You want to guess what she graduated to? Motherhood. She is happier than a duck in water. And she is tired of the corporate structure. So that's good. But she said, Dad, I just wanna, my joy is just to help people. And in mental health, that's a big deal. So her last position, she ran a company, one of the key officers in the company for sexually abused people in Kansas City. They were advocates, one of the best in the country. That's a vision, that's a vocation, it's everything. That's all she wanted to do is just help people. So I'd go to visit her, you have to go take a baby from here to here, whatever. You do what you need to, but that's her heart. That's her career coefficient. How many people here know their career coefficient? Fabian? So if I paid all your debts, gave you the $100,000, what's the thing that you'd really like to do that's in here?
I'm not sure $100,000 could do it, son.
Well, $500,000. I gave.
First of all, to start the Louis Vuitton store, I'll take up the first 100,000.
Yeah. No, what would you do? What's in your heart? If you could do anything you wanted to and you're taken care of, what would you do?
I'd probably invest it.
No, but that's not doing anything. That's just what you did with the money.
Yeah, that's
What would you do with your life?
I'd do what I was doing now.
You do what you're doing now. Okay, so
It would really change my life.
that's where your heart is then. Project management. That's good. Yeah, there's a whole host of things possible. But see, that's how we get companies that do things that nobody ever did before. Someone has a vision. When you have a visionary, then you have to have someone that can control them too. So that's called a career coefficient. Those who created yesterday's pain do not control tomorrow's potential. Forgiveness is the key to your success and to your future. Never build your future on your past. Don't take journeys into yesterday. Let your life point to your future. You can't build on what has happened, but you can build on what can and will happen. We have the story about an executive assistant for a company downtown in Dallas, and she made a mistake one day and it cost the company $50,000. So the next day she shows up at the executive, she says, John, here's my resignation. He said, you can't resign. I just invested $50,000 in you. That's forgiveness. Executive-wide, yeah. So we have to go with the punches because to me, making mistakes is not a big deal. As long as you don't do it every day. But I'm going to make mistakes occasionally. Mary will. And so let's just go with the flow and make sure we don't do that same thing the next project or the next cycle, whatever you're in. To me, that's how, and some people, that's why a lot of companies don't do lessons learned, because if you do, I got to point all these people and say, you did this wrong, you did this. Who cares who did it? What's the solution so we don't do it again? That's what will get you something. And that's what lessons learned should be about. And that's the empathy, suspend judgment. So no one has to feel bad or regret going into the meetings or not even have them. So that's very important. The broken become masters at mending. Your solution to somebody with a problem. You will succeed in life when the hurt and problems of others begin to matter to you. How many people in here know what a rut is? Anybody? You ever heard people say, I'm in a rut? You ever heard that term? Who knows what a rut is?
When you're dissatisfied with what you're doing.
That could be true. It's real easy. A rut is a grave with the ends knocked out. Whatever's happening is going to die. Your vision's going to die probably. I'm sure when you're unhappy like that, you feel like you're going to die half the time too. But that's all the rut is. So if you have someone in a rut, what you have to do is kind of keep going. If you keep going, then you can move out of it. But a lot of people like to stay in the rut, and then they like to pout, and they like to suck, and all that kind of stuff. That's no fun. But the key is it won't get you to your next destination. Because everybody has a destiny. Everybody has a vision inside of them. If they recognize it, they can fulfill it. And like Fabian said, it may be, I had an interview, I don't know how many years ago, a lot of years ago, I was talking to the vice president, and I said, have you ever figured out why you're here on the earth? Kind of a good interview question. He said, gee, I don't believe I have. I said, I have. I'm here to be the best project manager in your company. I know that. And that was one of my sales pitches. And I believe that's true. We should all want to be the best. The thing that I have a problem with is people want to be the best, but they never want to improve. So I talk to people about, well, we've got this course that'll help you do this and help you do that. Well, I'm not interested. So if you don't want to invest in yourself, who's going to? Well, my company doesn't have any training dollars. If your company ever has training dollars, take it when as soon as they offer it, and then book the courses, because in about a quarter it'll be gone because they have to spend it for something else. You know how that goes. But we've got to invest in ourselves. And if I were starting over, every year I'd do something, some type of course that would help me in this. I met a lady 6 or 8 months ago, and she said, I'm just finishing emotional intelligence course. And I said, that's great. How long is it? She said, a year. I'd like to go to that course. Okay? But do something, because if you improve yourself, you're going to improve your situation. And if you got something in your heart that you really want to do. Now here's one of the keys. I tell people, like with the teenagers, like to play guitar. That's a hobby, not a career, okay, for most kids. But anyway, if you want to start something, just start it part-time. The key is if it doesn't work part-time, it'll never work full-time. But you don't have to leave your job and all that. But if you want to do something, give it a shot. We've tried 2 or 3 or 4 things that we thought were interesting. This one stuck. We're 10 years old. 95% of all companies fail in the first 5 years. But yours doesn't have to. Let the other guy. So, empathy and compassion are the key. All men fail. The great ones get back up. Everybody makes mistakes. We have to look beyond that. Truth is the most powerful force on the earth because it's the only thing you cannot change. Honesty and integrity are pillars of life. What you have to remember is whatever you compromise, you will lose. You compromise your integrity, it will be gone. And unfortunately, we see that in the political scene day after day. An entire career just gone in 10 minutes. We don't need to do that. The thing about telling, the great thing about telling the truth is you never have to remember what it was. Because people don't tell the truth, they've always got to remember what they said to the last person, whether they say the same thing. But if you tell the truth, you never have to remember. Just say it straight up. Because I personally believe that anybody that's honest and fair, you can do anything with them. You can succeed in any project. The only challenge I have is I've met some people that were not honest and they were not fair. That's another story. Then you have to use your emotional intelligence more. Never complain about what you permit. Don't tolerate disrespect, strife. People rarely respect or follow anyone who intimidates, dominates, or manipulates. I gave my presentation, I think it was last year, to UPS, and I had half the United States represented there in the accounting area. And the CIO, I went to lunch with him. He's the controller for the company. And he said, I fired one of our higher ranking managers this year. I said, great. It's only take you a year to the day. He had to document everything. He says, Joe, if you just do things the way we've set them up, everything will be fine. He said he would never do anything that way. So he finally fired him, he challenged it, and the employee lost because it was clear cut. Guess what happened to his team that he was responsible for? Their productivity increased 300%. People never like working for an ogre or someone that's mean. Anybody here like to work for someone that's mean? I don't. And so there's a lot of factors, and sometimes we can make shifts within the company, but don't let yourself, be disrespected and people that don't value. And, if you work for a company where everybody hollers, good, let them holler at each other. You can go have a little peace somewhere else. So you never correct it if you're unwilling to confront it. Now, it may be a career-limiting move to confront it, but at some point in time, you're going to have to say something. Those who perceive their worth are disqualified a relationship. Remember, you are important. Never waste time trying to prove something to someone else. You will never outperform your self-image. Never allow what others say about you to change your opinion of yourself. Never give more time to a critic than you would a friend. Critics are spectators, not players. Critical people are disappointed, bitter, disillusioned, unfocused, and hurting. Move away from them. Constructive criticism is pointing out your potential. If you have character, you don't have to worry about your reputation. Your thoughts have presence. Doubt is deadly. Become informed. You know, it's interesting because I was just talking about how you need to improve it. But do you know any law officer, if you ask them, say, Henry, when was your last training session? He doesn't say 5 years ago. He says, oh, I requalified in January or whatever. Always training. Attorneys. My tax guy, he's got a whole new book every year. Government makes sure they have something new to do. He's got to make sure he understands what that is. So they're always ongoing training. Why are we not doing the same thing? So we're always, but you can't complain if you're not improving something. And we can be improving ourselves and we'll become an asset. We're getting ready to teach an MS Project 2010 course, and people don't realize that if I take it now, then when my company gets around to it, they're going to say, who here knows anything about 2010? You'll be the only one to raise your hand. So you'll be the best project manager. That's what you do when you start continuously improve yourself. And it's an investment. So you have to become informed, you have to believe in your product, and usually it's you. If you're discouraged at work, how much time, how many hours do you spend becoming informed? Are you too busy making a buck to develop and understand and have confidence in what you're doing? So I know a lot of people, they're worried about the dollar, when can I get my next promotion? I believe if you make yourself, you know, basically an educational tool, those will come, those opportunities will come. I had a student one time, and I said, so what are you going to do in the future? Oh, he says, I'm going to be vice president of my company. I said, really? What are you now? Oh, I'm a project manager. But I think he's going to be a vice president. He's got it in him. But, you know, what do you shoot for? Well, shoot for something, you know, the next step or whatever, or just shoot at being the best you can at what you're doing. You know, there's some people we know, anybody know about the halo effect? Take your best technician, make him a manager, destroy his career. I think that's one of the reasons that project management only has a 25 to 32% success rate on time and on schedule. Okay? Because we have to have the right people in the right position. But if we continually educate ourselves, then we can be that person or that candidate. Or you just do your job better. There are people just happy as a duck in the position they're in. If you want to do that, that's great. I know several people like that. Patience is a virtue. Your greatest mistakes will happen because of impatience. Refuse to be rushed by the emergency of others. Pace yourself. That's the silent factor that you're talking about. Take time to just relax. Skilled negotiators teach that waiting is a weapon. Success always begins somewhere, begins at some moment, and begins with someone. Has anybody ever heard of the law of relationship? That means you're only 4 people from anybody you need to know to be a success. So if I know Jim, he knows somebody. By the time I get to 4, I'm going to find someone that's going to impact my future. That's true. Because you'd be amazed at what kind of a matrix you can get when you do that. But it always begins with someone. This is a little test. I'll tell you what, if you want to take this test, take it and send me an email and I'll tell you what the answers are. Okay? Let's open it up for questions, thoughts, comments, whatever. What did you think about it?
That was good. Thank you.
It's an interesting subject, but the thing is, it's one of the key ones. Armco Oil did a study. They took all their people that were successful, and they had 15 common traits. 73% of those traits pointed to emotional intelligence and 27% to IQ. And I shared that with Mensa 2 years ago. Judy was there. That was interesting. There was an attorney there, and he says, I looked at your material, and he says, I think I'm a couple standard deviations to the left. I said, well, maybe I can bring you in half a deviation. No, you can't. Except I solved one of his life's problems. We were talking later, and he says, I got a problem. He says, I got a 3-year-old son, and he wears me out. Well, he's 55. So that means he just ditched his second wife. So I said, that's easy. Buy him a big dog. The dog will wear him out before you ever get to him. He said, never thought of that. Never thought of that. Well, you got the IQ, boy, you know. And I told him I was a project manager, so I said, I know what my IQ is. I said, I work in ranges. My IQ is somewhere between 0 and 200. What I didn't tell him was I didn't care where it was in the range. There's only one qualification for Mensa. Your IQ has to be 140. And they're nice people, once we got used to it. But they're very deliberate and very opinionated. Questions? Yes.
I've seen some of this, multiple times before, and there's one thing you added, this little box, the team leadership. I haven't seen that before. Is that in one of these books, or is that sort of
Yeah.
your contribution?
You mean the house?
Yeah, the house.
Yeah.
The team leadership is number 5. I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Actually, when Anthony wrote this book, he adapted from Goldman, $13 on Amazon. Maybe you'll win one tonight. Who knows? Yeah. Do you want to give these away now? Sure. Yeah. Now remember, this is for your cube mate after you read it 3 or 4 times. But this is kind of a new subject, but it's so relevant because I cannot tell you how many. Does anybody else have anything they want to put in here if they're not represented? Okay, I'll let my bride pick out. Because usually I always have someone that give me a hard time, and they always win the book. Loranda Aiken. Thank you. Good. You want to come down? So you got a cube mate that needs some help, Miranda? Loranda? I'll tell you what, it's interesting. I gave my...
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Sure, yeah. I gave my presentation a couple weeks ago, and it's the first time it happened, but a woman came up to me and she says, 1 hour. She says, your discussion changed my life. I said, really? Well, she's in class now. She went through the 20-minute opening. Now I know why. Yeah. She said, I've been looking for this all my life. Just the ability to get an understanding. Oh, how about that? Diana Holt. Do you need one?
I do, actually.
Okay, good.
Thank you very
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good, good. So let's talk about emotion. Who thinks they have a challenge in life that could be covered by emotional intelligence? That would be everyone, I hope. What do you think about the subject?
Well, I think I've been through a similar presentation, and I agree with you. I mean, even though I think all of us have experienced several of the things you've talked about, just bringing it to the forefront and reminding how I manage difficult teams. I host a call every day with 15 people that call in and another 10 that are in the room with me. It is my beating every morning, and it's all how you approach it that turns it around. And sometimes they're very good to work with. Other times they have personal problems. Today, for example, it was a lot of challenges we went through, and the last half hour of a 3-hour meeting was talked about deep fried foods, and brought the team together in a different way.
Sure, whatever.
But it was, we're talking about very global people. I mean, they're all over the country, and a core group of them are here. So, it
Good.
gave,
Sure.
It was a little bit of a, letting your hair down kind
Sure.
of situation.
Now you can invite them to the Texas State Fair because they have deep fried everything. When I saw deep fried butter, that was amazing. Yeah. Deep fried Twinkies, I could buy that. Yeah. So, what'd you think? Yes.
Just wanted to ask you, you could share a little bit of your insights on silence. That was one of the questions.
Silence. I think silence is a tremendous negotiating tool because a lot of times when people say something, they know what they want you to say back. And what they do is they catch you off guard. So the problem is you're working with your subconscious, so the first thing that comes to mind may be something totally off, but if you just relax for a minute and just say, let me think about that for a minute, and then just have some silence, then it gives them a chance to maybe adjust their expectations a little bit. Because some people like to get it in sharp so they can get back the opinion they want or get their way, whatever. But I think silence is great, and it's a great negotiating tool. And like I said, with my wife, I just say, I just heard about it, so I'd like to think about it, and usually it's like the next day. And then I can formulate an opinion. I can actually think about it and not rely on reacting. Because reacting doesn't buy you a lot, I can assure you. Just like with emotions. Your first emotion, you better stuff it somewhere so you can think about it for a minute. But silence is great. And then there are just times in life when we just need to be silent and, maybe take 10 minutes from your lunch hour and just walk out somewhere and let the cobwebs shake out a little bit. Because the mind is a racing element. Because when you realize there's 400 billion actions, and we know about 2,000 of them, there's still about 399 billion doing something back there, and it's happening. And your body's reacting to a lot of that stuff. Anybody else, comments or questions?
When would it not be a good time to be silent?
Sometimes you can tell when they really want to know something, then you just have to explain. If you're doing like for me, doing a presentation, if I can't remember something, I just go on to the next piece, and it gives you some of that continuity. I'm thinking more in personal relationships, or like say if I had someone difficult in my company to work with and I was taking them to lunch, what I try to do is have 2 or 3 and get them beforehand, 2 or 3 key questions I want to ask them, then I just let them talk. So that would be a silent factor there. And if you do have someone difficult and you work with them in particular, I have people say, well, why would I take him out to lunch? I said, because there's a problem somewhere. And once you know who they are, I tell people, John may be the meanest guy in the company, but if you get to know him, you walk into work and say, hey, John, how's your daughter Sarah doing? Go to the next meeting, takes out the person on that side and that side, but he'll never touch you because you got a relationship started. Yes?
If you're in a meeting and the purpose of that meeting outcome is like a decision, and the decision's going to get made, whether you speak up then or not, you kind of are, that's a good time to not be silent however you need to collect your thoughts, but don't leave the meeting without saying your thoughts, because the train's going to have left, so to speak, and you're not going to be able to get your point out, and then you're kind of stuck with that decision.
If you don't give your point, then you've never been heard, so you can't later say, well, I thought this when we made that decision. And the first thing you're going to say is, why didn't you say something? Yeah. But the thing is, and how you state that is important, because instead of saying, well, I think that's wrong, I think you should do this, just say, well, have you ever considered this part of it? We work with entrepreneurs, people starting businesses. We have to do that all the time because they think everything's cool. I know exactly what I'm doing, and they know nothing. So they're harder to work with. So you have to say, well, have you thought of this possibility? Then when the train wrecks and they realize that was the best possibility, then you didn't push it and you didn't throw it in their face, but hopefully they'll remember, well, Gary told me that about a month ago. See, because what happens is they usually end up doing what we tell them. They just don't do it right then. They'll do it later. But yeah, make your voice known in a positive manner, and don't belabor it. Because if you know, well, this guy's already made the decision, that's fine. Just say, well, you thought about this thing or this account or the possibility of moving into this market or whatever. Let them think about it. And then if you think it's really important, just drop them an email and say, thank you for your discussion today. I just wanted to iterate that we talked about this. Don't say I'm going to stuff it down your throat. We talked about this. And then when the train wrecks, he wants to know what to do, say, well, check that email I sent you. I think there might be a possibility. But one of the key things with handling people and working with people is humility. Just have a humble heart, because you're not going to get anywhere with brashness. Some people like to do that, like to roll over people. They ignore roll over people before they run out of people to roll over, and there's no one following them. Have you ever noticed that? So you have to be aware of that too. And it's just bringing yourself down and present things positively. That's part of controlling your emotions. It's part of the whole emotional intelligence spectrum, and having a positive attitude. Anything else? What do you think, Fabian? You're a thinker, aren't you? What are you thinking about, or can you say?
No, I've done some work in this area, so I'll just kind of give it a few comments.
Yeah. And look at the people that you have relationships with and make sure you know who they are. I had a lady in one of my classes, she says, we just started a project with China. I said, I don't even know who these people are. I don't know what makes them tick. I don't know the positives or the negatives. I don't know anything about them. It's time to find out, because they had a huge project, particularly with international, as much as you can. You were talking about virtual teams, I think. They're more difficult to work with, but just say, Henry, could I just give you a call next week? We can just chat for maybe 15, 20 minutes. Just say, here's who I am, who are you? That's better than nothing, for sure. Okay. You two young gentlemen that I talked to before, what's your take on it?
I think it's very important that relationships are probably the key thing that you have in your job. And these things are very important to develop them and understand how they think and the reasons why they're making their decisions.
You run into that a lot, especially at my company, because we have such a diverse group of people and generational gap. We talk about that a lot. We've got a lot of generational gapping, which is communication and getting to know that person.
A lot of times with the generational gaps, what you can usually tell is the wisdom comes from the older generation because they're adapting to the younger generation. The younger generation, they just, well, I pretty much have a handle on everything. I've been here 3 weeks already, so I think I can handle everything. And they're just so excited and all that, so you just channel that. So hopefully they can get something done and don't screw up the whole works. But make them feeling part of it. And the wise older generation will do that. The unwise older generation will say, here's, you do it this way. And then 6 months later, they're not there anymore. I know a lot of people that drive people out of their company, they just don't know they're doing that. But it happens. Anything else? Any questions or comments? That's all I have. If you, work for a company, I can give this presentation to your company. I don't have any fee. We're just trying to bring the awareness of emotional intelligence and what it can do. And who knows, it could change your life. That happened 2 weeks ago, so that's great. But I tell people, if it helps you work better with any one person in your company, you're way ahead of the game. And if you want to, Anthony's book is on Amazon for like $13 or $14. It's a good investment. I'd read it every year if I were a young, senior analyst or whatever, project manager. Sir.
Thank you. It was a fantastic presentation.
Good.
Here's a little gift to you from
Thank you,
from
sir.
the school.
We appreciate that.
You're a great audience tonight. Thank you.